More than a decade ago, a family was on the hunt for a four-legged pet to join their family. But what they found was something unexpected: a gigantic wolf dog at this shelter. After further testing through DNA, it confirmed the unexpected. They had no idea that the final outcome would be so different from their expectations. Instead, the family met with a breeder who claimed to have the perfect husky puppy for the family. The family instantly fell in love with the adorable little pup and decided to take him home and call him Yuki. For a couple of months, everything seemed to be fine. The children of the family loved to play with their new puppy, and the parents were thrilled at how adorable he was. But as time went by, the parents of the family started to become quite concerned. Yuki was growing incredibly large. Usually, dogs reach their adult size at around 18 months. However, Yuki was less than a year old, and he was already larger than an average dog. As well as his size, the canine started developing some non-dog-like traits. He started to become a bit more aggressive, especially around food, and he was becoming harder to handle as he would ignore commands. All of this added up, and the family began to think that perhaps Yuki wasn't the dog for them. When the pup was just 8 months old, his family decided that they simply couldn't take care of him anymore, and so they surrendered him to a shelter. Unfortunately, though it was a kill shelter, and with how wolf-like Yuki was, there was a very high chance that he would be put down. However, something then happened that nobody expected. Because of how much like a wolf the canine appeared to be, one of the shelter's staff members decided to contact the Shy Wolf Sanctuary to see if they could determine whether or not Yuki would be accepted. The sanctuary was set up back in 1994 by Nancy Smith, and it can house anywhere between 20 to 100 wolves and wolf dogs at a time. Its mission is to heal hearts and minds through rescue, sanctuary, and education. Brittany Allen, a senior volunteer at Shy Wolf Sanctuary, said that someone had obtained Yuki in some way as a puppy, and they realized pretty quickly that he exhibits more wolf-like behavior versus dog-like behavior. He ended up at a shelter where basically wolf dogs or any other dog that appears to be wolfy are kind of put first to be euthanized. But before Yuki could be accepted into the sanctuary, the volunteers first had to figure out how much wolf was in him. To do this, they took a blood sample so they could check his DNA, but the test showed something very unexpected. When the results came back, all of the members of the Shy Wolf Sanctuary were shocked. It turned out that Yuki was a mix of 3 different breeds of canine. He was 3.9% German Shepherd, 8.6% Siberian Husky, and a massive 87.5 gray wolf. With such a high percentage, Yuki was immediately accepted into the sanctuary. Shy Wolf Sanctuary is an exotic animal sanctuary. We mainly rescue animals that were bred to be pets and ended up unwanted or abandoned for a multitude of reasons, director Jeremy Albrecht mentioned during an interview. Once Yuki was moved to the sanctuary, he settled in with ease. The sanctuary's vets made sure to do a health check on the animal. He was in reasonably good health compared to a lot of the animals that come to us and had a very outgoing personality initially. We even considered him for ambassadorship at one point. One of the directors of the Shy Wolf Sanctuary explained, much like when he was back with his family, Yuki was very protective of his food. They pretty much just annihilate food, and you don't want your fingers anywhere near a wolf's mouth when you're feeding it, Brittany Allen explained. So, in order to feed the animals, they make sure to keep the wolf dogs back when putting their food in their enclosure or give them treats through the fence. For the first time in a while, Yuki was loving his new home. However, that quickly changed when something terrible happened. Shortly after arriving at Shy Wolf Sanctuary, Yuki managed to hurt his leg on a palmetto and opened up a wound on his right rear knee. The wound ended up taking a total of 5 surgeries to finally repair, and in that time, Yuki became cage aggressive. One of the directors of the sanctuary explained, due to how extensive the injury was, The volunteers had to keep the canine confined to a cage for a while after his surgeries so that he didn't reopen the wound. Luckily though, Yuki was given extra care to help him recover from his terrible ordeal. Over the time that he spent at the sanctuary, Yuki became quite picky with who would look after him. Yuki isn't necessarily more social versus pure wolves. We have pure wolves who will run away when they see new people because they are generally shy, curious animals. Yuki, however, will run straight to a new person, and if he doesn't like them, he will become aggressive towards them. Brittany Allen said, "At first the adorable Wolfdog wasn't as picky with who he let into his enclosure, but after his surgeries, he slowly but surely kicked out all of the men so that he was left with an all-female volunteer group. When I first got here, Yuki allowed men in his enclosure and women, and then one by one I watched him literally kick the men out of his enclosure." Judy, a volunteer at the sanctuary who's gotten close with Yuki, mentioned during an interview. She then went on to say that the small group of women that looked after Yuki were called his harem, and while he was more open and trusting with females, his harem weren't the only girls he liked to spend time with. He soon befriended another wolf dog called Bella. The female canine was actually more dominant than Yuki, despite her being smaller than he was. However, the two seemed to make it work, and they could be seen spending time with one another, whether that was playing, eating, or simply relaxing near one another. They seemed to create a special bond. Everyone at the sanctuary came to love Yuki, and they weren't the only ones in an effort to try and get more awareness in the world about these incredible animals. Volunteers at the shelter regularly posted pictures on social media to show people how special these animals are. We show off their adorable moments in the hope of helping people identify with them at least, and maybe change their fear response into a healthy respect through education, and also giving an animal a chance at a decent life when otherwise they would be euthanized, Brittany Allen further clarified. But the sanctuary wasn't prepared for just how enamored the world would become with Yuki. After a post was put on social media in 2012, it quickly went viral. People shared it all over the world, and by doing so, were able to learn more about the sanctuary and its mission. This was also helped by one of the world's most watched TV shows, Game of Thrones. The series features giant wolves called dire wolves, and many people all over the world started to compare Yuki to these creatures. This helped with his popularity, which meant that the sanctuary also benefited from people wanting to know more. Sadly, when Yuki was 11 years old, he got a heartbreaking diagnosis. He was diagnosed with cancer last year, and unfortunately it is terminal. Yuki has been fighting it for quite a while now and is persevering, so it is business as usual while we enjoy our time with Yuki, director Jeremy Albrecht revealed in an interview. The amazing canine fought as hard as he could, but sadly, when he was 13 years old, he finally succumbed to his illness and passed away. Whilst everyone at the shelter was incredibly sad, they knew that they had done everything that they could have for Yuki, and that despite his rough start, his life had been full of love, happiness, and lots of fun. What an incredible story. Make sure to check out the Shy Wolf website to find out more, and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons for even more incredible tales.